we'll have a lot of fun in this next one. It's a hoot.
I'm going to have fun if it makes sense.
Woo-wee. This next one is like just fun, rainbows, RC Cola, and lollipops. It's Wonder Woman #3, written by Tom King, art by Daniel Sempari, colors by Timo Moret and Clayton Coles. I don't know why I was going with the colors, but it is colors by Timo Moret and Clayton Coles. He's on the letters. Now,
sure is.
The idea of this is it's boring. I've said this before. Stephen Bat-Dab Mitchell, he gets mad at me every time, but I just end up, there's a lot of narration. But
even last issue, you had Wonder Woman taking on tanks and soldiers and just standing her ground, showing you how hard she's willing to fight to stay here, like she fought to get to Man's World in the first place. That was still kind of boring in its depiction of this one. You have Wonder Woman walking through corridors, standing in elevators, and just talking. I'm like, you took the action portion that made the last one tolerable in my mind, even though it was still kind of boring the way you depicted it, and made it less.
And I mean, of course, because, it's Tom King, we're going to get multiple panel deal. Yeah, and okay, it's kind of a neat, she's in the elevator, and you're going to have, I think it's an
going to Sarge Steele's office.
And so I get the idea, it's almost like the elevator, but she's there, and there's a guy that did not need narration. That could have been, because the players, they're kind of like, okay, thank you, hit number 32. All right. And then all of a sudden the guy's like reaching for the gun, she kicks him down. What I find in this issue, what that happens sometimes with Tom King and other people, almost like a Ram V and things like that, when you over-narrate it, I don't know, I have no time or space to see the art. The narration, the art's really good.
Even the idea of the narration in this, like, it's the Sovereign from the future telling Trinity the story of this whole thing.
This guy likes the yakety fucking yak.
I'm telling you, I just read it, and it just leaves my mind, because I actually forget what the hell I'm actually reading and what they're talking about, and what, the subject matter and why we have to do this. For some reason, like, the idea of what we're dealing with the narration, it does not click with me, and I don't think it works very well.
You say that 10 million %. I was reading it, and at one point I stopped and thought to myself, if I ended up being like really quizzed on what I just read 2 pages, I wouldn't know, because it's very, it's very pretentious narration. I know you're trying to play it through the Sovereign, but it doesn't really work for me. And then in the meantime, it just keeps going, and you see a guy doing a crossword puzzle. Then you see his face, 2 panels. Nothing is in this. Like the idea when you take like those classes, hey, you're going to take the SAT. Well, you have to be in a room that's like that, but like triggers to remember stuff. And there's nothing here for me to remember. There's nothing where I say, oh my God, that was a cool scene. It all blends together because of this narration and really not much happening. You have Wonder Woman show up and say, I want to talk to, Sergeant Steele. Well, we don't really, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no office. I think there is. I don't know. While that's going on, because you want to have this big reveal that it's Wonder Woman, guess what? We know it's Wonder Woman. Like you're playing this play of guy with the crossword puzzle. Now he's doing it. It's all classic writers of Wonder Woman and artists. Okay. Then you get to the next, Wonder Woman. And she's there. Hey there, pal. Let's go. And then, hey, there's that. And then yet the Sovereign's there talking to a military guy who is very into all these, relics he has. It's supposed to really play the idea
Private
of
Delgado.
He's been around for, the Sovereign even mentions, like, he's a line of sovereigns.
Exactly. I don't know if the Sovereign, he's already an old man, like Mr. Burns level, but it seems like his family has been the shadow government all this time, putting things into motion and keeping pretty much the government and America under their thumb the whole time, and things working out to keep them rich and everybody else poor.
Yeah. And so when you're going through this, the idea of there's always been crisis actors, I get it, but it's not interesting to me the way it's presented, and it ends up where if you really
the Sovereign's family gave John Wilkes the Booth to kill Lincoln.
Yeah, and the gun, and he ends up saying like, and he laughed at this, and we did this, like he was an actor. It's true. I think that the way that this plays out, when you get this whole play, that's John Wilkes Booth's gun. When we gave it to it feels like Tom King thinks this has never been said or done before. It's been done a million times. It really has. It's kind of a neat little play, but it's not over the top, oh my God, he cracked the code. It's kind of like, okay, let's go.
Honestly, I'm happy with this part of the book because it's actually giving me some background on who the Sovereign is, what our threat actually is, because otherwise you have Wonder Woman walking through an office building finally getting the Sarge
have
Steele.
that, but I don't think I learned. I just learned that there was more Sovereigns down the line. We kind of already got the idea that they've been manipulating the deal, and you see that by the end. But yeah, and throughout this, I did see some people where they were like, I can't believe I guessed it. The Sovereign was talking to Trinity. We knew this, right? I mean, we saw that in number 800. We saw them talking like, I have a story to tell you about your mother. And then we go to this. I'm like, yeah, people seem like they didn't get that, but he's telling a story and all right, then Wonder Woman's in an elevator. She's kicking a guy. And even then, when, like I said, maybe you have that as almost silent because it's like Shakespeare wrote, this whole heavy is the head that wears the crown. You know that was made. I'm like, come on now. We're telling a story with Wonder Woman, and you seem like you're bored.
Your most intriguing part of the Wonder Woman aspect, like, again, she makes her way through an office building. Eventually, she's trying to, guards are trying to stop her. She kicks their ass, but she just makes her way to Sarge Steele's office, where she sits down. She wants to know about that rogue Amazon Emily who killed those people, and they sit down and start discussing the idea that Emily, wherever she is, she has a baby on board. She's preggers, and the idea left to us that Trinity is actually Emily's, daughter, and not, Wonder Woman's, even though it's not a huge deal because, hey, Trinity, we barely know ye, and the idea of Wonder Woman's kid and stuff like that is just such a weird part.
It's a big deal for collectors. If anybody grabbed the idea of the first, like this to me lessens it, if it is the play. But I thought the idea where people were saying, and also what you'll do, and some guy kind of arguing with me this week about what Tom King has established. As I said to him, Tom King will usually only go one route, the ambiguous route. The idea of if he's going to change her, hey, Clay versus Zeus, he's going to hint to things. Well, he's going to hint to it, but then he'll pull it back later anyway, and that's what he does.
He never stops talking about the Clay aspect now, though.
The idea, and there is a little play that maybe some people will think is smart with the idea of the kid, and it was told early in the narration in one of the first two issues about how Wonder Woman was actually like, oh, and you were the grand mistake. You were where they did. And they repeat that here again with possibly it's a weird play to kind of go, but when you're doing all of this, you just have to. I never thought that he was going to reveal a father, unless, as you say, nobody I think is going to do. He's not going to do it because then people are going, man, I don't think Wonder Woman would F that guy, or oh, they did. Like that's what I think.
Comic book Twitter.
And then if you end up where it's Steve Trevor, I think that makes sense. But then people, even in this issue, and I don't know if you got the tone of it because the tone is off. Wonder Woman at one point is like at a point here. She's so bored with beating up soldiers that she's yawning to make it like an elevation thing. I don't think Wonder Woman would ever do that. I don't think Wonder Woman ever beat the crap out of somebody and think that that's boring. These are things where, she's paying attention not to kill him. Maybe it just felt weird. But when she starts talking to Steele about Steve Trevor, is almost like they're talking about the simple kid who's there in the room that you're talking about. Oh,
it's your Forrest Gump.
Weird. Yeah, it felt weird. The idea of, well, I know that you were sending Steve, so I was playing around with that. Like,
you talk about the idea of feeling weird, even when she's showing her hand here, where she, Sarge Steele has a gun to her, and I have an army, and she's like, well, I have an invisible jet, and this jet is right outside of his window, not invisible. I'm like, well, it's not the invisible jet now, is it? And it has gigantic Gatling guns that are almost the size of the jet on the wings.
I know that, and you had to have thought at one point, where even at the point, get on your knees. No, and they're like, oh, Rocky, he's going to
no, I just sat there. The thing is, I appreciate the idea that we have a Wonder Woman who won't get on her knees, because I know that you wanted in that era of Wonder Woman that we had previously during Rebirth, you wanted to show that she's the compassionate side of her, because that's all they wanted to show. So she's a woman who didn't fight, even though she grew up as a warrior race who always fought every day. She would get on her knees in submission. This is showing you she's not that character, and I always appreciate that because it's not everybody's cup of tea.
She would never get on her knees in that situation even back then. She'd get on her knees to a god.
It was weird.
She would get on her knees to something to stop a fight, but the idea that it's a soldier she wouldn't have, even back in the day, gotten on her knees to that. And the idea of it, like you said, though, just think of the play here. The reason why she isn't getting on her knees is because somehow the government has made a 9/11 about a lady who killed a bunch of dudes in a bar. It doesn't work for me. And at this point, she's not doing, but the idea that she's doing her investigative work, she just goes right to Sarge Steele. Hey, do you know anything? He's like, I think she's pregnant. It just, I don't get it. And at points, the dialogue of Diana changed in that weird, wonky way where Tom King had when he did that whole Super Friends deal in that demon realm or whatever, where she sounds like she's half Russian and just nothing felt right to me. Everything felt off, and I just didn't like it. And then you get the over narration, you get this whole play of this slow burn but boring. Just don't get it. I don't get why, even people this is incredible. I'm like, I don't think we've even started the story yet.
Well, when the story becomes the idea where it's the nation against because of what's been spread out there about the anti-Amazon campaigns because of what happened in that bar where Emily killed those 17 men, we have that going through. But to further the idea to keep things going down the sovereign's path that he wants to happen for the country to get the Amazons out of here and take Wonder Woman down, we have a soldier that's presented to him at his house, the sovereign's house, to say like, oh, you were there fighting Wonder Woman. I'm just going to say last issue. That's when they did it last issue. How did that make you feel? Did you feel like she took your masculinity away? I'm like, no, it's cool. It's just, and then you have to have him pull out the lasso of lies. Here, take this lasso. She made you feel like it lost your masculinity. And then the guy's like, she took everything from it. It becomes this weird thing that we had in the previous Wonder Woman run that the Clune Reds were all about with Dr. Psycho, where it all became like this whole thing, feminism against masculinity and stuff like that. And I'm like, you didn't need to take it to that route. And even saying it like this, the whole reason this guy kills himself because of what has been put in his mind magically through the lasso of lies, and where he writes a suicide note about how Wonder Woman caused him to kill himself because of the loss of masculinity. I'm like, that's a weird place to take this for no reason. Like the idea that just the masculinity alone, she took my masculinity, she made me less of a man. I'm like, that's weird.
And to think of it overall, first off, I thought it was disgusting, and I think that he does this shit for wow moments that I have to see a panel where a guy's blood is seeping out of his fucking head because, for no real reason, because you could have done that different ways. I think that he does this bullshit all the time, and I even was thinking of some of the things that he's done where you do it and you're like, you didn't really need to do that. Like in the, people go with the Strange Adventures. Oh my God, he made Adam Strange a genocidal maniac. Yeah, that's bad, right? But he also had Mr. Terrific in that say, I'm glad my wife and unborn kid died because I didn't really want to deal with them. Like, he just said it. Why? Why would you?
Character assassination.
Then you had in the whole play of Guy Gardner. He's a handsy abuser, and that's it. And you do that. But one of the other big things that really shows me that Tom King is just a really, really just awful, awful person. I don't even care. It might be a vendetta, but this is awful.
Probably.
You end up having that up in the sky. That book, the
Walmart book.
Yeah. In that, I always talk about how he always kills kids, but actually in that, a lot of people ended up being upset because there was like full 2 pages, I believe, or at least one, where you just saw almost like the 9-panel grid of Lois dying horrifically over and over and graphically over and over. It ends up being of the mind trying to get Superman all fired up, whatever. So you're like, and people had a problem with that. And he's like, oh, well, deal with it. Just think of that, though. Those books were made almost specifically to get kids involved in reading comics. And he did that. He doesn't give a shit. He does this shit because I guess he can and because he's awful. He is just an awful person. And in that whole play, when people said, oh, this will be a cool deal, and I actually saw some people saying, oh, that's great because he's putting to light the suicide rate of. So I'm like, he never does it that way. It's always shock value, and he uses that shock value. And it made me laugh just the idea where people are like, well, this is cool because he's, if Tom King was in this comic, he's a CIA guy. He'd be on the wrong side. Like he'd be on these bad guys of this subterfuge thing because that's kind of the government there. I just don't get it. And I don't know why he goes out of his way to just be awful. And ending up where I'm like, I just don't like seeing these things. Like I said, Wonder Woman going and fighting some things. The idea of, oh, you're going to say, and now writes a letter. And just think what Tom King is going to do then is we need to get people against Wonder Woman. So this letter is going to be released. Oh, my God, this guy felt like Wonder Woman cut off his balls. Nobody's going to think of that.
That day, Wonder Woman denied my rights as a man to exist in this world. That's why he killed himself.
Who's going to listen to that and say, oh, my God, that bitch Wonder Woman? Nobody. It doesn't even make sense. No. If I ended up where I was, in war, I'm a soldier, and I'm like, oh, my God, that lady, they'd be like,
the thing is,
get over
this feels like something I've seen the media try to spin, and really right-wing media try to get people all open arms about the masculinity and stuff like that. I sit back because I don't care about people with their ideas of this, that, or the other thing. As long as it doesn't involve me, you do whatever you want. Don't hurt anybody, please. That's part of my thing as well. Don't hurt it. But this idea where they'll put this out there, and I'm like, this is still very silly, and this doesn't need to be here for what you're currently doing in Wonder Woman because it's very goofy.
Here's the deal. And I've watched a bunch of videos of people who are soldiers, people who are in, battles and war. And what they said was the way that he's trying to spin this, because it is kind of a known thing and whatever. And like I said, I can't speak for anything like that because I haven't done that. But the idea where these soldiers, because the rate of soldiers, especially who've been in battle and things, the suicide rate goes through the roof. So the idea is that they end up with this toxic masculinity that they can't get rid of. So this kind of, to me, it's kind of disgusting the way that he's playing it and using it in this deal. Remember at the one point, was it the Rorschach book? I can't remember which one it was, but he was using that seance deal that you end up having the comic book people doing, and it was like a personal thing. And he just, I don't recall. He ends up grabbing things that he shouldn't have any right to even touch.
See, the thing is, with the soldier's death and suicide and what it's going to lead, the only thing I took from this is the idea, it's a goofy thing to do because, like I said, it doesn't make much sense for when you have the overall picture of how the nation already feels. This isn't like, stoking the fire all that much in my mind for what you could be doing, but it is just showing me in my mind, this is like, not me, but like comic book readers, that, hey, our guy Sovereign, he's a bad dude. He used magical lassos to kill this guy.
But here's the thing that I get, and again, like, I think it was 3 videos I saw that were people, soldiers talking about this, is the idea that what Tom King's playing at is that when people see that, like, in this world, like, those soldiers always do that, like, they're wacky in the head, and that, like, all of them didn't. One guy was like, really had to stop the video because it upset him that much, because the idea where he reads this, and again, he's just saying, I'm reading a comic, and then the soldier does it, like my buddy who did this 2 months ago, because unfortunately this is like plagues people who were serving and things like that. So there was no reason for it. You already know that Sovereign's bad. You already pointed out that they were involved in all these things like John Wilkes Booth and whatever. And then you get to the end and you have to go that much further. He always goes too far in this disgusting deal. Like, oh, we're going to kill Guy Gardner. Now let's fuck on his, melded fucking remains. Like, he does this fucking nonsense that I hate. And I just hate it. But you get out of that, and then it looks like maybe Trinity isn't Wonder. I said to you when I read it, it's like you're kind of winking at the idea that Trinity might not be Wonder Woman's daughter,
right?
But Wonder Woman would raise her, and I think that he thinks it's clever because we have seen in the past when Diana was around, she was everybody's daughter. She was the Amazon's daughter. Everybody would say, like, treat her like a daughter. So I think you're playing that little bit there. But I think she's cute as hell. And this is where I read this. He still can't get his damn dick prints off of the shit of going a little too much and being, the wingdings, things. But she's cute and she's really fun. Even when she's like, I ran through a clock. I'm like,
because now you're in the backup where Damian Wayne and John Kent Superman are babysitting little, Trinity at this point in time while the other Justice Leaguers are off doing Justice League stuff.
Yeah, because at the end, this whole thing it ends with Sarge Steele because he's like, oh, I found out about your girl. Oh, what'd you find out? She's pregnant. Oh, my. And yeah, then you go to the deal.
But it's a fun little moment that has no real ramifications to anything in the story. And this honestly feels like a palate cleanser to the darkness, boring stuff, because at least here you get a cute little girl that Damian Wayne is forced to watch, even though he doesn't want to, while John goes off to do Superman stuff, even though Damian's like, no, you can't do that. You're stuck here with me. But when you have Damian's like, look, all right, John left, they all left you with me, and she's in an adorable little Robin costume.
When she says she's Wonder Woman, she says, I was in a clock. That might be the cutest thing I've ever seen.
It's so cute. It's amazing.
What it reminds me a lot of is how cute Damian was, crawling with the cowl and the cape when he was a baby.
This backup does really nothing for anything except, like I said, a palette because it's just a bunch of cute little stuff where Damian takes her on patrol. She kicks the crap out of Killer Croc because she already has superpowers that is super strong. And John and Damian have to agree, let's not tell anybody about this.
Yeah, it's fun. And here's my man Aiden ended up reading this and got a hold of me. He's like, do you think that they put this in there like that because they just showed a suicide and you just want to end with something like, oh man, that's cute and fun? I'm like, I don't know, but it is very,
that's what I took it as.
Very cute.
But I will tell you this, the weirdest part about our backup story, the idea of Damian and John being babysitters in Wayne Manor to little Trinity here, when you have this, sometime in the future, when Bruce gets the mansion back,
right?
He doesn't care anymore about freaking identities, apparently, because right there in one of the lounge rooms, he has a big framed photo of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman together. I'm like, you wouldn't even put Jason in a family photo, but you're going to put up a freaking Trinity photo right there in Wayne Manor. What if somebody comes over? Are you just a big fan?
Usually what happens, it's Gordon. who comes over. Because remember when he saw the picture and Barbara was on? What the fuck? Like, he comes over and he's like, really? Like, all of a sudden, because he's like, why? Like, I'm trying to pretend I don't know your better. Like, please,
stop flaunting it in my
don't
face.
make it so ridiculously easy for me to figure it out. But I could just imagine Rose. Big fan there.
It's the craziest thing, though, because when I look at Damien and John, I really don't see them much older than they are right now.
I agree.
It's weird because like Trinity, she's at least 3 years old, it feels like, right here. So maybe, I don't know, like like a year plus or minus maybe, but they just don't feel like they're much older. Maybe 3 years is a lot, but for a teenager, it feels like it should have big ramifications on the body.
Damien should be about 18, like around there, right? And it would change him a lot. I wanted him to come pop collar just to kind of like, ooh, Batman 666, he's got that. John's there. It's kind of a weird play. And even that play of like, you're not Superman. I was Superman. Yeah, you're the worst Robin. It's okay. But it really, what it did for me, if you're looking for Super Sons deal, and you kind of forget things over the deal. I went back because we were all in the Slack talking about Super Sons. And I ended up like, what were the things one of the things that we were annoyed with is the first run of, they just argued the whole time. Finally, they kind of, but this
that's why
goes
they had the
right
Fortress
back
of
to
Attitude.
that. Yeah, this goes back to that, but it is cute. The idea, I like at the one point, the second time where Damien like says the F-bomb, she yells it too. It was kind of funny. But I'm telling you, that suit, when she kicks Killer Croc, and also when she's sitting there on the bed, it's so cute.
And Damien has to teach her how to tie her shoes because she doesn't know how. I don't know, for some reason, even the idea when Damien's like, look, when I was taught how to tie my shoes and I forgot how to do it, they locked me in a cell without food or water. Like, the thing is, I just don't think they're like, yes, Raish and Talia, they expected the best from him. I still don't think they would do that to the heir of the demon's head.
My whole plan, that is true. Like, I don't want to ruin that body. I needed that thing later. But even like when you're going through this, like, that's where later on, it's not as bad because this is just a cute little story. But when later on I talk about, should say, Axelrod and the Hawk Girl, and I do even mention Tom Kenning again, like, the guy can't get away from just bringing up something miserable. And I think that there's the play. I don't know how you do it, but it would have been a cool play where John and Damien are there and like, oh man, when I didn't know how to tie my shoes, my parents, got mad. And then she's like, well, what did they do? And he's like, well, they made me do it again. And like walks away and John's like, that's not what happened. You told me that story. They tortured the shit out. That would have been a neat thing to show. Like, I've needed Damien to be more of a, like, I don't know, the softer side that we've been seeing lately. And yet, though he has to keep himself from it, but in this, he's kind of just like, yeah, you know what?
But
and she's like, you're not going to lock me up. I may. I'm like, oh, God, what are you doing?
I don't know. Even the idea, though, like, you don't want Damien to revert back to his asshole self because we have such great progression with him recently. But even just the fact, though, that he's willing to babysit this little girl, I think that's still the softer side of Damien.
Yeah, it is. But he seems like that he's probably doing it for, like, brownie points to Wonder Woman. Like, it seems like John might be more, I don't know. Even then, there's a dam that's breaking, and the big play with Damien is like, somebody else will do it. It's kind of the joke of how many super characters there are, but I don't know. People were saying that they love this Damien. I didn't. I thought he was a little bit cut, but he's heading towards maybe a dark future. It's okay.
I do think it's funny, though, that this many years later, he still has the same current Robin costume. Because I actually thought I was hearing something online about the idea of him getting a new costume soon. So it's such a weird thing. Like, did I hear that? Did I make that up in my head? Because he still has the same Robin costume at least 4 years later.
He only, what happens, Eric, if you don't know this, is he's got to get pissed off and rip that R off, and then he gets a new one the next day. That's how it works. It's almost like, Doctor Who and going through the deal. He hasn't ripped the R off yet. Yeah, he hasn't ripped the R off, so he has to wait for that. But what would you give this overall?
Ultimately, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10. I do enjoy the backup because of how fun and sweet it is, but it really has nothing to do with anything except for, like I said, a palate cleanser. The rest is kind of boring. It doesn't really lead to anything except for the reveal that, hey, that rogue Amazon that you really don't know anything about except she killed 17 men, she might be pregnant. And then the idea, if you really care, she might be Trinity's mother, but I don't know enough about Trinity to really care because she's just talking to an old man in a cell right now. And then we have flashbacks to something that like is going on that feels goofy with the new inclusions they put here on top of being boring. But I do like the backup enough because it brings some lighthearted fun with a little girl and Damien. I like it.
I like when, and the art really does a lot with it, with her big eyes there when she's when they're there fighting Croc and you end up where Damien's like fighting him and then she's like, what do I do? And when you look at her, she's not talking. Damien's fighting Croc, and you look at her, and it's such a good way to show a little girl there where she's like kind of like looking and wants to peek around and like she's like trying to figure out what, like almost like at one point she might be like, okay, he's karate chopping there. Like she's getting ready to like, I think I'd kick it. And it's so good. And then you get the Tribe Called Quest. They're singing the deal. Can I kick it? It'd be awesome, Eric. But yeah, overall, though, I really do like the art throughout, but I'm a fuck you 5. And the idea, too.
Fuck you!
I took more offense to the suicide. But even then, like you said about what you learn here, I mean, me saying that what we learn is Wonder Woman went through a complex to get the Sarge Steel to say, Emily's pregnant. What we learned about the Sovereign is he bad.
He a bad dude, and he's got the lasso of lies.
We knew that. It's just, yeah, and so that's the big play going forward, but we'll have to see. I just don't like the book.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.